Wow.
And no introduction. Love
No
you.
introduction is given. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is John Ellis. 3 years ago this month, I stood on this stage, and I welcomed you to the first ever Automotive Developer event. And I explained to you how Smart Device Link was poised to change the world. Last year, I was pleased to be your closing keynote speaker, and I explained to you how Apple and Google were actually doing a better job than the automotive industry, and that they had figured out how to connect better, faster, and more emotionally. Today I'm on stage because I'm representing a client, the National Association of Broadcasters, and they have finally seen what the presence of Apple and Google mean to the in-car experience. It is not good, in their words. And so the NAB is now poised, based on what's happening in automotive, to say, hey, it's time to have a conversation about what's next. We call that Radio 2.0, and it has some very cool use cases, some very cool technology, but it has some very explicit requests of you, the automotive industry, and the automotive developers. To help me tell you that story, to help me share with you what we're seeing and hearing from the largest media groups around the world, please join me in welcoming to the stage John Clark, Executive Director of NAB Pilot, and Stephanie Bauer-Marshall, creator of M3 Advisor. Come on up, folks. So this is meant to be a conversation amongst us. If you have questions, I'm sure Scott will throw a mic out. What we wanted to do today is, in a riffing format, explain to you what's actually been happening over the last number of months as more and more vehicles are rolling out with Apple's CarPlay, Android Auto, and Smart Device Link, and explain to you some of the palpable, visceral reactions that we're now beginning to see in the industry, and sort of what is the response. So with that all said, I'm going to start with John. John, NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, is great, but what is NAB Pilot, and who exactly are you?
Who exactly am I? Depends on the day, I suppose. NAB Pilot is the innovation initiative of the NAB. It grows out of the technology department of the NAB, and our focus is, for lack of a better term, intentional serendipity. So what we look for is we look for ways that we can innovate within our community, within the broadcast industry, and outside of the broadcast industry. We look for partners. We look for people that we can partner together with and work with to create new things that benefit both parties. So Pilot includes a membership. We have a handful of members in our first year that are non-broadcasters as part of a new membership class. These people include folks like Google and Akamai, what was once Yahoo but now Auth. We have Nielsen, frankly, Shareably, Accenture, and Lacana. And what we do is we partner with those folks and get their perspective on various technologies and innovations. And then we work with them and our broadcast members, specifically a lot of the folks on the digital side of our broadcast members, to create, quite honestly, what the future is going to be for us.
So Stephanie, you were there from the beginning. In fact, they reached out to you to help actually create this brand. When you were told we're going to do this, what was the motivation? And why did it's over a 90-year organization? Why did they do this?
Yeah, so Sam Matheny, who's the CTO of NAB, came to me. I was an executive at Verizon for a number of years, and we had done deals together, and he's like, hey, I just got this new job at NAB, and we need help. We need help innovating and telling an innovation story. And part of that was rebranding and creating Pilot, but really it was about bringing different voices to the table to really help innovate, right? If you're just talking to yourselves, right? If you're a car organization in the car industry, automotive industry, and you're just talking to yourselves, or if you're the wireless industry, which is where I come from, and you're just talking to each other as carriers, you're not going to get anything done. And so the impetus for creating Pilot and for creating this new membership category was really to help bring in those new voices and to have adjacent, everybody that has to happen or have a voice in the value chain to really drive and impact innovation and change. And when you are an older industry and there's resistance to change, and sometimes you need to bring in other voices than just, instead of just Sam or John banging their heads against the wall, hearing it from other places and demonstrating, which is part of what we did at the radio show last week, the impact of seeing it and really having that, as we would call it, the oh shit moment of, wow, things are changing and it's going to happen. And it's eye-opening, and I think having those conversations will get us to the point where we're actually taking action upon it.
So one of the things that we, and I will not put you on the spot here, actually because I can't see, but we have walked people from the NAB around shows, the automotive industry, and we've asked questions. So do you know who the NAB is? And quite frankly and honestly, I know a lot of the NAB members are really surprised when they're like, no one says, no, I don't know who you are. And so part of what this effort is, and to reaffirm what both John and Stephanie said, is the NAB recognizes and acknowledges the #1 listening location today for radio is the car. It is by far and away the #1 location. And so the advancements that we're doing in the car industry, whether it's advancements in ADAS, whether it's advancements like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto or smart device, or even, oh my gosh, autonomous driving with possibly no dashboard. Radio now has an inherent interest in understanding the future. So with that said, I'd love you guys do the words, because I heard them, but let you guys do the words. Your members, Cumulus, Westwood One, MS, companies, big companies, multi-billion-dollar brand companies, sat in a car last week, some cases for the very first time. Tell people what they saw. And what the reaction was.
I think the reaction, I mean, you probably know what they saw. I mean, as soon as you play with any of these things. The reaction, sometimes was silence. Big eyes, like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on there? Wow, Stephanie already said it, oh shit. And then there are some who are like, yeah, I get it. Already know that. So we run that spectrum of, wait a minute, this is interesting, this is different, wait a minute, we've got to move, we've got to figure this out. So I mean that reaction really covered a span there. But I think overall the general impression was this stunned silence, or this like this wait a minute. I mean it's hold on a second. So let me start thinking about this.
Yeah. So to give context, and I'll let you do the Jerry Lee quote here in a second. Oh, so to give context, what happened last week? Radio show. It's the largest radio show in North America, just dedicated radio show, hosted by the NAB and RAB, Radio Advertisers Bureau, and courtesy of our friends at Ford, they gave us a Ford Fusion 2017 Sport, and we were able to have it in the demonstration room. And we had Android Auto up, CarPlay up, and Smart Device Link. And depending on who the executive was, we asked them if they were an Android or CarPlay, and then we went forward with them. But what we would do is we'd start the car up, or actually the accessories mode, and let them play with the radio, listen to the radio, enjoy music in Austin, Texas. And then I'd be like, well, but you all have a device, and you might, whatever the device was, your Android Auto or your iPhone or an Android device. We're like, what are you going to do when you get in a car? You're going to jack it in because you want the map or you want power or whatever. So let's just go look at what happens right now to this car. So we jack it in, and the screen goes black. Then the screen returns, and you either have the auto interface from Android or the auto interface from iPhone. And all of a sudden, myself or my colleague would sit back, kind of park across the arm and say, okay, now find the radio. And that's generally when the oh shit happens, because they're touching buttons and they're trying to find it. Yeah. What was the, he's a former executive, he's a former chairman. He runs a multi-billion-dollar media company. What was his comment?
He said, he's like, this is disastrous. He's like, this is not good for radio. And so when you're sitting there in that car, and you can see that, wow, my entire phone, so my behavior on the phone is now coming into the car, and radio's not there, right? It's not easy to find. And so I think it was extremely eye-opening for quite a few people to look at it from that perspective. And to say, okay, yeah, we've had amazing growth in radio. There's 230 million listeners, 18 to 34. Surprisingly, millennials are fairly strong in that area. 91% of them have listened within the last week, 2 hours plus a day. And so, I mean, the stats are there. I mean, it's a very powerful medium, and there's a huge amount of reach, right? It's the largest reach of all the different opportunities for advertisers out there today, but yet, and so they're, saying, okay, well, this is great, everything's awesome. And now you go, okay, bam, look at this. Oh, yeah, that's the oh shit moment.
And so as part of that conversation then, we began to walk down a path of an imagination saying, maybe it's time to contemplate something different in radio, the next generation of radio. What today you see on the title screen is Radio 2.0. And so we began to ask them the question, like, imagine if we could give you technology on your phone that could actually tune the FM tuner in your car. Imagine we could do that. Then imagine that we could give you technology that would actually allow you to tap into a stream of data that told you what was happening over the broadcast stations in the area where you were physically at. And then imagine that we gave you technology that would allow you to actually tune the radio to the same exact content that the person is listening to on an IP stream, but then to do it over the broadcast channel. And then imagine if you could also be told on the IP channel that the broadcast channel was going to commercial in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that you had now 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds, whatever it was, to insert specific relevant ads as opposed to the broadcast ads. And then imagine more, we gave you technology to actually be able to contemplate vehicle data, like number of occupants, speed, direction, physical location, what was being done, what was being listened to, all sorts of contextual.
Where they went after
where they went to or whatnot.
radio.
Exactly.
Attribution.
And all of a sudden, people began, the broadcast community, the advertising community began to click and say, oh shit,
Well,
that is so
Or
cool.
like, holy
Can we
cow,
can't we do that?
Well, right. Well, that's where the tone of the response changes, right?
Yes.
It shifts from this is a problem to this is an opportunity. Wait a minute. I mean, think about all the applications we can create in that environment. Think about what you can do in that environment. Think about if we start really getting creative, how can we actually take the best of what we have and the content that we create and the connection to our local communities and combine that with the power of what's happening inside the car, what's happening on the phone. And then you have a very powerful statement and you have a very large opportunity with lots of ways to be, again, creative and to think about new services to provide to the consumer. That's where it gets really powerful.
And it's actually economically viable. I mean,
Absolutely.
Some of the other stats you didn't point out talk to how much money is being spent. So how much money is spent in radio, roughly, advertising-wise?
About 18 billion.
It's B with a B,
18
billion with a B.
Yes.
Yeah,
With a B.
18 billion.
Yeah.
That's just in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as part of why we asked and why we for those of you that came last night to the party, thank you so very much. We appreciate it. But why we asked to be a part of the conference and why we wanted to raise the awareness for the NAB is that there's now a growing recognition that radio can actually be a platform upon which to do innovation. But the first request is the ability to tune the radio. And yes, we saw the roadmap. We saw what was being talked to by Teamer, and it's absolutely fantastic. Our call out to all the OEMs and the tier ones in the audience is don't delay that, because that becomes a fundamental, foundational element to this. And if we can get that done, then all of these hacks moving forward can begin to explore just this rich opportunity in terms of all the different kinds of broadcasting. What's really interesting though, John, we haven't talked about it here, but we'll just touch, you don't just represent radio.
Correct.
What else do you represent?
Well, I mean, so the NAB, it's all of broadcasting. So
Which
when I
means
talk about
TV.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and even I'd even take it a step further. It's radio and it's TV. Certainly, our membership is of TV and radio members. I mean, that makes the most sense. But when we think about, and particularly in Pilot, when we think about our broadcast members, we think about them as multi-platform media companies. I try not to segment them by radio or TV, or because we work primarily with the folks who are steeped in the digital side of things and are dealing with many other platforms. So for us, we are a large group of media companies
Right.
that are broadcasters. But what that means and how we do that on a day-to-day basis is much broader than just one platform.
So tell the audience a little bit, actually, because it is illustrative, right? I mean, for having relied on the auto industry for the better part of almost 70 years, 60 years, and then to now begin to realize that there's a relationship to be had between broadcasters and OEMs. What were some of the experiences y'all had at the Detroit Auto Show? I mean, there's some comments and anecdotes you were giving about the multiple different perspectives that are happening because of all the transformation that's happening inside of the car.
Sure. Well, so it's about different perspectives. How do you look at the world, right? I mean, and Stephanie mentioned earlier you want to get outside of your echo chamber. So even within industries, you're kind of within your own silos and your own echo chambers to some degree. So at some level, for us, we went to we took a group to the auto show in Detroit back in, I guess it was January. And the reactions you get there is you have folks that are steeped in radio think about it in the radio sense, and then we're having conversations with folks who work on the TV side, and they're thinking about, well, wait a minute, that dashboard changes, so there's another opportunity. There's something to consider there. Well, maybe it's more than just audio or video. So you have those kinds of opportunities that come up. And then you have, again, when you think about it from the digital side, folks who are more steeped on the web, those platforms, it even becomes different because now it's interactive, back to that. So, those different perspectives, as you go about and you see those possibilities, you put somebody in a car and they get to play around with what the dashboard is today, you really get to think about, well, what is that going to be tomorrow, and how do you take advantage of that, and how do you create something, an interactive, engaging service that really does provide a service back to our audience and to our consumers, and that's the lens through which we look through it. But when you combine it from those different perspectives, even from within our own industry, you get really interesting thoughts and comments about what it could be.
Right. So one of the things, Stephanie, you and I share a mobile background, and one of the things we learned over time is, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, behemoths, older, staid industries at the time, suddenly all went to say, we can open up and we can do developer programs. Yeah. What did we see on the mobile side happen that we would expect and anticipate to see on this broadcast side? Well,
you can look at lots of examples in the wireless industry. So, ultimately we were this walled garden, right? I launched mobile advertising and we had the front page, right? And we were like, yes, this is awesome. And then things happened, like an announcement that came out today, this thing called Apple iPhone. We had app developers, we had an app store, we had an app developer ecosystem, but it was probably not as easy as we wanted it to be. And so things opened up, and then you can look at SMS, right? At one point, you could only SMS between all right, AT&T can only talk to AT&T, Verizon can only talk to Verizon, and that was problematic, and it held the industry back. And then once we had SMS interoperability, things skyrocketed. American Idol happened, and that kind of helped, teach consumers that, hey, this is what we can do. You'll see every carrier has a developer program where they opened up APIs, right? Everyone has an IoT developer program. So Verizon has ThinkSpace. AT&T has their developer program. And so when you do that and you really harness not just your own ideas or people who are kind of stuck in the bureaucracy of banging your head against the wall telling people internally, hey, we should be changing, or there's this really cool thing over here, but oh no, you can't work on that. But you guys can, right? And so by opening it up to the collective power of the intelligence of different perspectives or different developers, then you get to have a lot of new ideas and new things that come to play. That's why I think a lot of carriers, and not just carriers, but people do developer programs, because there's a lot of smart people out there, and not all of them work inside your company. In fact, probably many of them don't. No.
So another, to reinforce some of the messages from Joey and Timur, Scott, Doug earlier today, and on behalf of the other OEM members that are listed, this is the automotive industry taught Apple and Google how to do what CarPlay and Android Auto is, and in so teaching them, they actually now have learned the power of what it means to bring your mobile lifestyle into the car. And so I would want to re-impress upon people as we've gone talking through the stuff that we've heard today is this community only works as well as you all work. And part of our process here is to let you know that it's not just about maps anymore or just music apps and some of the other things. And they were very cool stuff that we saw at the hack yesterday. With this opportunity, as we get quickly into what was being called reverse control, we get very much into a world of unlimited possibility of money and opportunities, but more importantly, a global opportunity that is both on broadcast TV and broadcast radio. So if you ever thought that this SDL, like where does SDL go? This is where it goes, and this kind of community is what makes it happen. So John, let me riff a little bit on if the NAB were to build a developer program, what would developers in this room expect to see from somebody who's been in the industry for 90 years, trying to become now digitally infused and opening themselves up and allowing their members to be opened up digitally?
Sure. I think what the expectation you would see there is, again, the looking for what we, as a broadcast industry, brings to the table, and also what developers bring to the table. You look for the strengths of everybody involved, right? So in that standpoint, if you've got a community that's steeped into development, app development, digital development, obviously on the broadcast side we do some of that, but We do that not because that's our industry, we do that because of our service to community. It's a means to an end to some degree. So in that case, we bring to the table, and what we'd want to pair that up with a development community is that service to our community, service to our audience, service to the folks that we provide information and entertainment and help for on a day-to-day basis. So we want to be able to figure out how can we do that in even more, in more ways than we are now. How can we continue in expanding that service out? So in that regard, we would look to work with others, and from a technology standpoint, like, again, how do you marry what we're really, really good at and have been really, really good at for 90 plus years with a community that can come in and help us think through some other ways of doing that. I mean, it's an educational piece on both sides, right? I mean, it's not one-sided either way. So I think the biggest expectation there is, okay, let's all try to figure out what the strengths that everyone brings to the table and figure out how do we put those together and make even something that's better. That would be the number one expectation, I think you would see.
So one of the comments, Stephanie, that we always hear in the radio industry is it's siloed. I mean, everyone's siloed, but radio very specifically, this doesn't talk to this hand, this hand. Last week, though, we saw a pretty uniform response regardless of whether they were a broadcaster, a content creator, or an advertiser. Speak a little bit to sort of what the RAB Ginny Hubbard came. Ginny Thompson came from Hubbard. Spoke a little bit more about what's available and sort of the advertising dollars that are backed behind this. What kind of economic opportunity actually awaits folks in this room if they can actually walk down the path of enabling this kind of connectivity?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to what John said earlier, the sort of universe is 18 billion and probably growing. 17. And then you look at the opportunity, not just in radio, but in overall digital advertising, when you create a new platform on radio, sort of Radio 2.0, and you bring some of the formats that you're able to have in other, mobile advertising, right? Now you can, video is growing. With HD radio and the new technologies in the car, you can see the album art, but you can also see ads, right? And then thinking, one of the things that you hear a lot from advertisers and agencies is the lack of attribution, right? Whether that's in broadcast TV or in especially radio, right? How do you know that it's moving the needle, right? Is my advertising working? And when you start to think about what these new technologies bring in terms of radio and digitizing it, you're able to then do attribution and to measure, right? And so there is resistance, right? If that's your business model and it's been working and you've been able to squeeze money out of it, $18 billion, then you're like, oh wait, I don't know if I want to be measured, right? But the buyers are going to pull you that way, one way or another. And so it's better to be part of that conversation early and figuring out a way that works for everyone than to have it slammed down your throat, I guess.
And I think it's important, a lot of the businesses that we talk about, regardless of the industry, we always talk about scale and users. I mean, every time you create a new platform, it's like you got to get to some certain amount of, start from zero, it's got to get somewhere. Yeah. The strength of radio lies in its reach right now. I mean, we're talking, 230 million in a given week. I mean, the strength and the size of the reach of radio today is, it's just a huge opportunity. I mean, it's almost like it's built in. Well, it is a built-in audience.
It's a built-in audience, absolutely.
I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even from that standpoint, as we think about how do you advance it, we have the advantage right now of this massive, audience, this massive, user base in essence. And that part, we can't undersell it. I mean, it's huge.
I mean, it's
so Radio 2.0 is attribution. It is sort of a hybrid combination of IP and broadcast. It is rich in economic opportunity. We got a lot of people saying yes on all sides. There's opportunity for the OEMs and tier ones to participate in a brand new economic opportunity that hasn't existed previously. Opportunity for tier 2s and 3s, so the app providers, content providers to participate in ways that they haven't participated before. It sounds magical. It sounds absolutely magical.
It's beautiful.
So what are the obstacles? Yeah. Well, so okay, John. This is maybe what are the obstacles as we've been talking about this? What are the obstacles to Radio 2.0, and sort of what can this community right here, and then those who watch the stream later, developers and others, what can they do? What's the message about obstacle elimination?
I think it's participation, both sides, all parties, right? I mean, it's it's back to, how do we put people together in a room face to face. You know, how do you actually put organizations together so we can see what's going on and we can actually have those conversations one-on-one. I mean, I think that in of itself is a challenge, putting the right people at the table together to figure out, okay, so how do we advance this together?
What'd you call that before? Intentional
serendipity. I'm sure you've heard it before. If you're not, take it away. It's awesome. You know, it's intentional serendipity. I'm a firm believer in intentional serendipity, and it's the notion of, you know, you discover things without looking for them. But at some level, you have to put yourself in the right place to find the things you're not looking for, right? I mean, it's kind of the reason, one of the reasons that we come and participate in things like this. Is one of the reasons why, you know, we're part of SDL, right? I mean, it's intentional serendipity. We may not know what we're going to walk away with, but we know there's going to find something there, right?
You're going to learn something.
You're going to learn something, and you know what? Someone else is going to learn from us, and that is intentional serendipity. And you know, if we can figure out the ways to rip away the walls to allow everyone participating to get in on that fun, then I think a lot of interesting and fun things will happen.
So, just one thing on that. I mean, you know, there are people in any industry that are resistant to change, but there's also, I mean, just coming in from the wireless industry, which was very innovative, and you know, yes, I was knocking my head against the wall in a lot of ways, but you know, it's technology driven, it's really cool, and it's amazing how that little device has changed your lives. But there's still people that are going to be in any organization that are kind of, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. And then there's lots of people that want to go, holy cow, like, you know, the open possibilities. And you know, I think the key is to develop things and show them the way, right? Like, give them examples, make it real, like what we did for the folks at NAB Radio Show, is like showing them, but there's also all this really opportunity. It's not just a challenge; it's an opportunity. No,
and you know, even when you talk about industry, there, you know, some people want to change, some people won't. Okay, that's good. Everybody's
in.
Everybody,
you end up in a good place, right?
You have better conversations when we can disagree.
Right.
Agreed.
I mean, we actually had this conversation yesterday. I mean, it's really good. If you can disagree, then what you come up with is going to be better than if we're all like, ooh, everything's perfect.
It's
like,
stronger.
it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So part of I'm sure questions that will be in the minds of the audience is, how real is this, right? I mean, it's easy to throw a party. It's easy to sponsor some cocktails. It's easy to sit up on the stage. I mean, it's easy to talk. For those of you who do know me, right, I had a big phrase: code beats paper. I mean, don't talk to me. Don't show me PowerPoint, sure. Right? Develop it. So how real is this effort, and what can these folks expect to see, not so much in the weeks ahead, but the months and years ahead, coming from NAB Pilot in terms of fostering this Radio 2.0 platform for their development? Sure.
So I think you know, stuff like this is, I mean, this is small. This is the first few steps that lead us into a larger discussion. I think part of it is, as we take steps forward, I think other people need to take steps forward. I mean, it's kind of meeting in the middle. So what are you going to see from us in a few years? You know, I'm not sure, but I think you're going to see much more interactive and much more engaging with the community, much more of us trying to find ways to create that serendipity, whether that be in small events, larger events, whether that be in larger ways that we can engage with the development community outside of events. So I think you're going to see movement in that area. You have to. Otherwise, nothing gets developed. I mean,
yeah, and just to plug, because maybe you won't, but Pilot has launched what it's called the second annual Innovation Challenge. And so with help from the Knight Foundation, there's $120,000 worth of prizes for ideas on ways that you can serve local communities. And radio is one way that you can do that. And so the entries are open until September 22nd. So since you already have some teams here, you may want to look at that, nabpilot.org/challenge.
Thanks for throwing it in. No,
and that's one way that they support it too.
No, it is, and I think the other thing to consider is, you know, we want ideas. Not just, I mean, the challenge, we want ideas, but I mean, part of it is like we want feedback from the other folks as well. It's really easy for me to sit on stage or us to sit on stage and be like, this is what we think it'll be. But you know, it's like, what do you want? I mean, what do the other players want? I mean, again, we have to find those overlaps where it makes sense, because when we do that, we can move forward together. So that's the other thing. It's an open mind, it's open ears. It's like, let's go. Let's.
So, I mean, there's a few minutes left. I mean, Scott, we can go to questions and answer, certainly if you want to bring up a mic. I do want to take the opportunity to call out two individuals in the audience in case anyone here wants to be able to follow up with them also about sort of what's happening outside of what John and Stephanie talked about. One is David Lair, he's Vice President of Engineering for the radio community. Long-term radio professional, was here as part of the hack with the team yesterday. Part of the whole, going to eat your own dog food, going to build, going to spend the time, going to see what we can do and what can happen. And then the next is Derek Roloff, who's coming from Emmis. Emmis is a major broadcaster, one of the top 10 broadcasters. And Emmis, along with iHeart, collectively have taken some strong leadership positions in trying to move the industry forward. We're very pleased that Derek was able to show up and participate. iHeart is also in the back. This is real. So for those of you who are like, do I bet on this or don't I? Radio's real, and it's available today. If there are Q&A, we can do some. I know we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. If there's not, we can continue to riff, or we can give you 5 minutes back of your schedule. Are there questions? I can't see.
Who's back there?
Yeah, is there?
The mic's.
Uh-oh.
Now I'm steaming. Yeah,
Scott.
there you go.
There we go.
The voice of Scott.
Sorry.
Any questions?
Needs no
I did say that, the
introduction.
voice of God.
Yeah.
Voice of God.
Yeah. Oh, come on, you got to have questions. I know Teamware's not up there, but come on.
Billions of dollars are available, and none of you want to know how? Come on.
How are billions of dollars available, John? I'd like to know. I am interested.
Build an app. No, yeah. No, seriously. I mean, what you're going to see probably over the next couple of months, I'll put it out there so that if I'm wrong, it's the consultant's fault, not the you're going to start seeing more positions from the NAB Pilot in terms of how do you access Radio 2.0? What does that mean? What are some of the technology advancements? Some of the things that David and his team have been learning, and some of the things that are going to come back to the automotive industry. I will tell you this right now: it's going to rely on remote control and sort of the reverse API set as a big foundational element. So I would encourage all OEMs and tier ones to move forward fast on implementation of that, and then we can start doing the business dialogue.
And I think it's important to note, or important to say, and I don't have the number, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's a big damn number. We're throwing out the number of radio, but I mean, we're talking about a whole different pie that we could be getting into. I mean, that's just, we're talking about this is what radio is now, but now in this kind of environment, the dollars actually go up because you actually can go into many other ways in terms of how you're going to make
Including
money,
digital,
digitally,
right?
locally, in those ways.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
Salem.
Much
Yeah.
better.
So
Much better.
Salem Media, he was like, wait a minute, these tires tell me what's
Right.
the pressure, so
I
I
mean,
could insert a tire
that
ad
package
literally
is
to
a
this.
lot
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah. So that's how you make lots of money. SDL is going to change the world. Any questions?
Radio 2.0.
Radio 2.0.
It's gonna
Yes.
change
You
the
walk away, Radio 2.0 and SDL.
Radio
That's
2.0.
Radio 2. That's got a nice ring to it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Any questions? Well, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you to John Clark from NAB Pilot, Stephanie Marshall from M3 Advisors. We'll be around for the rest of the afternoon. We will leave our contact information through with Scott, David Lair, and Derek Roloff, as I mentioned before, are also in the audience, and all of us are conversant in Radio 2.0. Happy to answer questions offline as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your support. Have a good day.
Thank you.